We are getting into the next section of the event. I would want to invite the panelists for the CXO panel discussion. So first, I would want to call out Gangapriya. Gangapriya is India's site lead and managing director at Ford's Global Business Solutions. It is a 10,000 plus strong organization based in Chennai, India. She joined as Director Human Resources in 2012 after spending over a decade at Mercer Consulting. Gangapriya is also a certified coach from International Coaching Federation. She's passionate about DEI, wellness, and she's also the sponsor for wellness program in Ford Business Solutions. So welcome Gangapriya on stage, please. Also part of the panel would be Dr. Sangeeta Madhu, Director of Chennai Institute of Learning and Development, a clinical psychologist and leadership coach with more than 20 years of experience. Dr. Madhu heads Global Leadership and Development, a program that draws on mindfulness and other techniques to build leadership skills. Welcome Dr. Madhu on stage, please. Also joining the panel would be Mr. Prem Singh. Prem Singh is part of the JK organizations. He's the Group HR, CHRO, based out of Delhi. He's also the Honorable President of NHRD North. Prem Singh is very active in various professional forums and has been recognized with several awards for his contribution in the field of HR. He was awarded the Seasonal HR Leader Award by NHRD in 2017. So welcome, Mr. Prem. And last but not the least, I welcome Sourabh Deorah, co-founder and CEO of Advantage Club. Sourabh is the co-founder and CEO of Advantage Club, a global platform for employee engagement with benefits like rewards, flexible benefits, communities, and perks on a unified platform. So welcome, moderators. Okay, so another reminder, so people who are attending the masterclass, it is happening in the concurrent hall next door, whereas people who are attending the CXO session can stay back in this plenary hall. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hope all of you are having a good opportunity to learn from the speakers so far. We are hoping that this panel will be another opportunity for you to sort of learn and take away on a topic that is increasingly becoming very important and a phenomenon that we are hearing and seeing more of in organizations and in society in general. The topic for today's panel is really focused on burnout. Is it an individual problem or organizational? And on the panel, we have Dr. Sangeeta, Sourabh, and Prem, who will be talking about 3 aspects of burnout, and hopefully there will be some takeaways from all of you. So my first question is to Dr. Sangeeta. So what is burnout? And how does it sort of show up? What causes it? Recently there was Kapil Dev who really stirred a honestness by saying that these are all very American words that are coming in, and if you had passion, then you would really not be impacted by things like burnout, depression, anxiety, etc. So what exactly is burnout?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gangapriya, for that question, and a very warm welcome to all the participants. Really glad to be here. How many of you felt odd today without wearing the mask? Please raise your hand. Okay. Rest of you felt comfortable not wearing the mask? So, GP, what we faced for the last 2 years is collective trauma. If any one of us say that we've not been through anxiety or days that we didn't feel like getting up from bed, I think you need a special free consultation with me. It's time we took away the masks. We live in a banny world. We're anxious, brittle, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Our parents got into maybe banks and lived there for the last 25 years and retired. The world has changed considerably. All millennials, please raise your hands. Millennials here? Okay, You're definitely not a millennial. We don't even know what millennials want, right? So burnout can actually present in many ways. In fact, only in 2019, the medical community recognized this as a symptom. Although it was there from the 70s, it's only in 2019 that the medical community started paying attention to this. And why is that? Because it's seeped into the business organizations. And we need to pay attention because the time is now, and the pandemic has really opened up conversations about mental health. The stigma has to end.
And how does it manifest as a clinical psychologist? What do you see? Symptoms?
All of us go through a headache here and there. We just don't feel like talking to others. We feel isolated sometimes, feel lonely, go for a smoke outside. All this does not count for burnout. Does not, right? It actually takes 2 years to recover from a burnout. And guess who are the employees who get burnt out? They are your star employees. They are your star employees, right? Perfectionism, micromanaging, multitasking, all this is taking a toll on us. 1 in 4 of us will have a mental health issue in our lifetime. This has to be taken seriously. Okay. And that's the reason I'm here, ladies and gentlemen.
And so it's like constant emotion that's sort of driving you to burnout. Is that what it is?
Let me start recognizing this, right? If I even ask an adult, how are you feeling today? There are about 34,000 emotions. Thanks to Brené Brown, who's come up with an atlas of emotions. Emotional well-being is not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity. It's a necessity, and I think all of us, every single one of us in this room has a role to play, because if technology and humanity can join hands and we stick to science, we will stay safe, and this is what the pandemic has taught us.
Wonderful. So I think the pandemic has actually increased awareness, provided space, made people comfortable to talk about things that impact their mental health. So I think we're hearing more about things like burnout and all of that because of the pandemic. And
absolutely.
In many ways, we can say thanks to the pandemic for having sort of highlighted these issues in individuals as well as society. So Sourabh, your organization works with companies across the spectrum. What are some of the trends that you see as far as mental health issues and burnout in particular are concerned? Do you sort of pick these trends? Are you seeing any kind of patterns emerging? Yeah, if you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot for this question. And first of all, very glad to be here as part of the panel. The pandemic, while it has given us the room to start talking about it, but has actually amplified this problem as well. The hybrid work model, work from home models, which we all today celebrate, that it is more employee friendly. But this kind of leads to a monotony. And as human, we are by default social animals. We have to be outside. We have to be interacting with people. And when you're locked inside a room from morning to next morning, and in an earlier world where you had a differentiation between work life, personal life, and as those boundaries start getting blurred, you actually get more higher possibility of getting into a burnout model. Even propagating culture is becoming a big challenge. So because as human beings, when you look at employees' Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in an earlier world, people would look for survival and security. But if you look at millennials or even the mid-generation which is there, they want a lot more than that. That's why people are not, like, the hottest government jobs are not as hot anymore, because people want to feel belongingness, people want to feel inclusiveness, people want to feel recognized for the work that they are doing. And again, in last 2 years, as people are getting more and more disconnected because of COVID, it's becoming harder and harder for people to actually feel those emotions. So as organizations, it's everyone's responsibility to ensure that employees are able to feel the same level of connect. There's no toxicity. And that's where, although what we have observed, almost 90% of the organization are trying to do something, but seems whatever they're doing is not enough. That's the biggest problem here. It's such a different problem for each individual. There's no like one size fits all kind of a solution. So you have to really listen to your employees, what's going on, and why someone is feeling burnout. It might be lack of recognition, it might be lack of clarity or impact that they are making towards the work, to understand what is the broader vision, or it might just be pure overwork. So as an organization, one has to structure this whole thing out and understand what is the pain point. And before even going into solving model, we just need to keep on asking why, what is the problem, and then figure out a solution to this.
You know, you said some very interesting points. All the things that are being celebrated now, or new ways of working, they almost seems to be a flip side that we are not recognizing, which is catering to an inherent need that man has, a human being has. Yeah, and that, you know, we need to balance out and not go one way or the other in a sense. You need that flexibility to work from home, but also you need the social connect that going to office brings. Yeah, you need the routine of going to office perhaps, and the sort of ease with which you can merge your home and office when you're working from home. So seems like, you know, we are swinging between two ends of a spectrum, and we need both. We need some portions of both.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's like the same thing, right? When everything went digital, we celebrated it. But again, as human bodies, we are designed to always work outside.
Yeah.
And the more we work, the fitter we are, the better we are.
Absolutely.
But today, most of us have moved to a desk job. Whole world is connected. It's exactly the same thing which is happening with digital work from home right now, where the same thing is a boon, but same thing is also a curse. So as long as we know that, and we can make an effort to kind of nullify that negative side, I think we will sail through this period as well.
Yeah. And the other thing that you also said is that there is no one size that will fit all. We really have to cater to individual needs while we are addressing issues that plague our organizations. Yeah, so that's something also which is a takeaway.
Yeah, and the approach has to be very humane in the process. That's the most important part.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. So Prem, you head HR for a fairly large and diverse organization. Do you encounter issues of employees burning out? How does it impact the organization itself? What do you see as symptoms when things like this sort of show up? Yeah, and how does this really play out in an organization?
Sure. Thank you very much, GP, and very good morning to everyone. Well, talking about how does it show up, I think there are several behavior patterns that one would observe. For example, all of a sudden you will see the requirements of taking leaves, you know, falling sick. All of a sudden you will see a surge in the messages like something urgent came up, not feeling well, I had a flat tire, or my mom is not well, or I'm not well, or my spouse is not well, or I need to go to school of my child. You know, all kinds of, so that's one set of behavior. Number two, which is more prevalent, is a sort of withdrawal symptom. So the individual starts withdrawing, his or her engagement starts dropping. That's a very serious one. Number three, the person tends to become more critical. Critical of the organization, critical of the people, critical of the bosses more often. And also, one would start spreading these, critical messages. So this shift, when you start observing, I think this is the first sign that the burnout has started setting in. Now, very interesting question. You used the word balance, and I just wanted to build on that. For the moment, I will leave the question, which I will deal with slightly later, as to whether it is the problem of an individual or organization. I'll come to that later. But I think the balance is something that we all need, because extreme of anything is not right. It's not good. It's not healthy. And I want to take all of us back to the physics classes of 8th standard. You know, we learned this concept of pendulum, right? Pendulum. So pendulum goes from one extreme to the other extreme, and it goes again to the other extreme, and in between, it is at the center. And the lessons of physics have taught us that the speed is maximum when it is at the center, when it is trying to seek a balance. Likewise, the human performs the best when there is a sense of equanimity and there is a sense of balance. So it's something like that you have a machinery, you have a car, until you provide it necessary preventive maintenance, you have already started running towards burnout. So the same thing applies to the human body, human system. So, so this is my take with respect to how does it show up in terms of the behavior.
And do you have cases, many cases showing up now, much more than what you had pre-COVID?
Yes, very interesting question. In fact, we have seen that the cases of burnout have increased post-COVID. And I want to deal with as to why this phenomena has increased. You see, pre-COVID and once the COVID struck, many of the organizations lost businesses. Many of the organizations scaled down their manpower. And after COVID, you have a situation where you are struggling to meet a very high level of demands from the customer. You know, don't forget that during the pandemic time, there was so much of work that could not be done, and all that pent-up demand of the COVID times is now coming back. So therefore, there is a significant increase in terms of volume of work. Not necessarily that all the organizations have again replenished their human resources to the same extent. Therefore, lesser number of people are dealing with much higher level of volume of work. So not only there is a stress in terms of the work and the pressures on the people, at the same time, there is also a competitiveness in terms of trying to catch up and trying to make sure that one delivers one's best.
So what I hear you say is that COVID has aggravated, but also post-COVID, the workload is aggravating issues. So it's happening that way as well.
Exactly, because you are trying to meet all this pent-up demand that happened during COVID times.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Sangeeta, I'll just come back to you. How does one sort of say that, you know, what I'm going through is really burnout? What are some of the symptoms? And how does one address it? I mean, how do you sort of counter that, or how do you treat it, if I may use the word treat?
So, I mean, it's very interesting, like what both of them said, right? So he said about personalizing the problem and also staying in the center. And I really like what they said. The levels of anxiety and depression have gone up by 25% globally. There's been a 10% increase in suicide rates. A shout out to all the women here. The rates of domestic violence has gone up by 20% in the last 2 years. These are very worrying statistics globally, and obviously is impacting all of us. Prolonged problems, like if it's persistent for a longer period of time, if it's pervasive, if you feel irritable in certain situations, it's okay, but if you're irritable at home and at work, so if it's prolonged, pervasive, and it interferes with your day-to-day functioning, like he mentioned, right? So you're not able to take care of your children, or you don't feel like going to work. So many times it actually presents as depression, right? But of course, depression is a medical condition which needs to be diagnosed by people like us who are only few thousands. Siddharth knows, we are only few thousands in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very personally burnt out, personally and professionally, because there are only few thousand, and I'm from this institute called the National Institute of Mental Health, Neurosciences. We need a few lakh mental health professionals. It's not easy. The burden is falling on us, right? So the idea is this, is that how do I take this responsibility of my own mental health, if not others, how do I put this cap on and recognize these symptoms earlier on, because by the time they come to us, they're coming with suicidal thoughts, they're coming with depression, they're on medication, and that's what we see because we belong to that community. But there's a lot that can be done. If you see something, say something. Ask, don't assume. Be curious about what's going on with your team member. Don't be critical, as you said, right? I mean, critical is negative emotions are like Velcro, and positive emotions are like Teflon, If I ask you who is the good boss you worked under, you will never remember. Oh, that guy, oh, I don't like that guy, So negative emotions are much more, they stick on, right? So I think emotional agility, you can read Emotional Agility by Susan David, Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. Now, all these scientists are really talking about mental health from a scientific perspective. It is a science, and the more we educate ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, it's awareness, acceptance, and availability. We need to build awareness. How do I even know? Like patients come and ask us, if I have a stomachache, I know I have to go to a gastroenterologist. But how many of us would say, I will go and see a psychiatrist? Or, this is not to build my business, honestly, GP. My business is doing well. But honestly, the idea is there's a lot of stigma. So building awareness, acceptance. If I have a mental health issue, whom do I go to? Where do I go to? Whom do I talk to? Who is there for me? So how do we build that support system, right? And I'd like to quote Infi here. We've been associated with the organization for more than 20 years. They've been a forerunner in this and worked a lot on mental health, recognition and kind of providing that kind of help at an earlier stage rather than when they come to us, right? So acceptance rather than denial. And third is availability, right? We are only far and few, we're only few thousands. So how do we build this community? Mental health for all. October 10th was World Mental Health Day, and the theme this year is mental health for all, and how do we make this as a global priority? So building the community so that we can build each other.
One is, of course, identify symptoms and sort of seek help. You also mentioned that, if you see others around you who may not really be up to their normal way of working, then you sort of check out on them and provide help. But if I have to do something about myself, when I think that, are there some things that I can do to address it?
Yeah.
I know balance is something, but to achieve balance,
I know.
It's the toughest thing it's a life's goal, actually.
Yeah.
So are there simple things that I can do?
True. So two things that I would like to say is mental health is health. Number one, 40 years ago, if you ran on the road and people will think that, a tiger or something is running behind you, but now you know that you have to run. Physical health is important. So mental health is health, and mental health is a continuum. Every single one of us will go through those days, right? So from the field of positive psychology with Dr. Martin Seligman, there are few simple exercises which can help build our own mental health. For example, writing a gratitude diary for 21 days in your room costs nothing. It actually helps you to prevent depression or makes you happy for the next 9 months. Wow, that's free, right? So I think one is gratitude exercise. The second is WWW, what went well today, because we tend to focus on what went wrong all the time. Negative emotions are much more predominant, so what went well is second thing. And the third thing is promoting psychological safety at work. How do I feel safe? Amy Edmondson's work, you can read about her. And so there's a lot that the organization can do. Mindfulness is something very, very close to my heart, and we recently did a virtual program with MIT, and it went really well. And honestly, there's just so many things that we can do, but evidence-based in a scientific way, and we know that the results are working.
Yeah. So, Dr. Sangeeta, I hear you say very simple things, right? Being thankful for everything that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, acknowledging all the things that went
Absolutely.
well. Maybe even pursuing something outside of your regular work, having hobbies, meeting friends. So these really don't cost much, really.
Yeah.
So simple ways in which you can sort of prevent or address burnout.
Yeah.
So Sourabh, what do you see companies doing to help their employees? What are the kinds of interventions?
Yeah, so like companies are trying all sort of things today to solve for this problem. I think most of the companies do have wellness coaches in general. That's a very common phenomena now. And it's very much required in case someone doesn't have, it's a great idea to have that. Secondly, it's important to empower the employee and also recognize their work. Like one of the major reason, or rather one of the primary reason in the burnout is that when people feel that their work has no meaning, nobody is giving them credit for their work. So it's very important, even at a fresher level, to kind of empower them and recognize them positively, and also explain them the vision which is there, which is something companies have realized and they have started putting a lot of effort into that. I think still where there's some gap is in the fact that people are not assessing quantity of work that people are doing, and somehow still more hours are more celebrated than the output. So that's an area I think people can do a lot more. But yeah, as a company, it's also important to train each and every manager to deal with the employees fairly well. At, I think, leadership level, people do kind of take care of it in most of the companies. But when it goes down to second tier, third tier in the leadership, that's where the trainings need to happen, especially for first-time managers, on how to handle new folks.
So Sourabh, I heard you talk about providing access to wellness coaches within the organization, recognizing people for the work that they do, focus more on the outcomes rather than the input, including time that people spend. You also spoke about, you know, Sangeeta really spoke about psychological safety, providing that, allowing people to be themselves. So I think many things that organizations can do, some simple and most important, and I think one that's getting a lot of attention these days, is training frontline managers to be the first level of defense or support for what's happening in the organization. So I'll come to you, Prem. Go back to that first question, you know, is it an individual or organizational issue? Well, I don't know if there is a yes and no answer to it, but what is your perspective? Because in some way they are interlinked also, isn't it?
So, GP, my take is it's not a either or situation. It is actually both. It is and. Organization, so let's try and understand. So there is a commercial contract between organization and employee, but more than the commercial contract, there is a psychological unwritten contract. And the contract is that organization would be or should be a caring organization, caring for people, their emotions, their well-being. Similarly, there is also an understanding as a part of this social, this psychological contract, that the individual himself or herself will also be responsible for his or her own well-being. There is an equal partnership, because the fact of the life is that your well-being cannot be outsourced to the organization. So you have a, as an employee, as an individual, it is my responsibility also. Now, many a times what happens is, and we have seen particularly with those who are high performers, and I have seen it as a trend, almost as a trend. Many a times they forget to differentiate the fact that life is not equal to work life. Work life is one of the segments of life. There is much more to life. So what happens is most of the high performing employees tend to over-focus, and I'm using this word very carefully, over-focus only on the work at the expense of everything else. In fact, I get reminded of a very classical case study that was based upon a research in the US way back about 19-20 years ago, in which they studied top 300 high-performing CEOs, and they wanted to see how much focus do they provide to profession versus social, spiritual, you know, some sort of hobby or what have you, and then the family. And each one was asked to rate their focus on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the highest. Majority of these people had a very high focus on the profession, personal growth, promotions, high salary, career. And so much so that the average was something like 8 to 9 on a scale of 10 on the profession, and on all other parameters, it was ranging between 2, 3, 3.5. This is not a balanced wheel of life. This is not sustainable. So the point I'm making is, it is the employee who has to make this choice, who has to take the first step of figuring out whether one is treating one's life in a balanced manner or the balance is getting compromised. That's where the responsibility of the employee comes in. As an employer, organization has to make sure that there are support systems available to figure out if there are any burnouts happening, to notice those, to take action, to counsel, to provide support, to provide medical support if necessary. And I think the first line of defense, as you rightly said, is actually the managers. They have the important role. One last point I want to make, and this is the reason why these conversations are very important. Gen Z and the future employees of the organizations in next couple of years are those kids who are now growing up in nuclear families. Majority of these kids, are growing up as a single child in a very well-protected environment. Some of them growing up as a sort of a pampered child. And I'm using this word very carefully. Majority of them may never had, or majority of them may not have faced a situation where the parents said no, because most of their demands were fulfilled. When they become the employees, there is an element of some sort of a brittleness. And then, with respect to these employees, the issues of mental well-being will become even more prominent. Handle them with care, with lot of responsibility. And these kids, these employees, future employees, will need much more support than what the current generation needs. That's another important point. Thank you.
You've raised some very important points. One is that, organizations can provide a supporting environment, but employee needs to recognize and seek help, and recognize that they're in a state where they need to ask for help. So I thought that was a very important point. The second is that employee also needs to walk that extra mile to get that benefit or take that support. Yeah, it's not something that organizations can thrust on them. So that was very important. I like the point that you mentioned around the next generation. And I think they are much more aware of mental health issues. They are much more conscious of their mental well-being. There's a lot more exposure to mental health related topics. So I think the next generation may have to be handled with a lot more care and support. I had a question for you. Yours is a very Indian organization. I would have thought that it's very family oriented. Does it make a difference to have an environment like that, vis-a-vis very professional, come here to do work and go kind of an environment that you see in many organizations?
Fantastic question, GP. Thank you for raising this. And I want to talk about a research paper I read a couple of months ago, that what millennials are looking for. And there was a mention that a large number of millennials are looking for a meaning. Meaning in the job, meaning in the association, meaning in the assignments, meaning in the work environment, a sense of fulfillment. So to that extent, and as my colleague Sourabh mentioned, that, at the end of the day, we are all social beings. And in fact, Maslow had said it many years ago, that an emotional connect, emotional bond, a feeling of being wanted, feeling of being respected and valued is a fundamental need. And therefore, while we always say that let's be professional. This was a professional discussion. Don't feel bad. Don't take it, to heart. Dil se mat lagao yaar, it's a professional stuff. All that is fine, we say it. But the fact is, we do have emotions. We do have a need of being valued. That's a fundamental one. To that extent, my personal experience has been that more and more leadership or the managers of the organization provide this comfort, sort of a safety wall or an emotional sense of safety. As my colleague mentioned, I think to that extent, life becomes much more easy. And it's not a question of MNC versus Indian organization. It's more a culture and style of the leadership team. I have seen a lot of organizations, MNCs, which are doing a great job. I have worked in one of them. Fantastic. I have also seen a lot of Indian organizations who have been doing an incredible job. So it's not really so much MNC versus Indian. It's more to do with the deep-rooted ethos and style of the organization. For example, in my current company, care for people is one of the fundamental values, one of the fundamental principles on which we evaluate managers.
Yeah. Again, wonderful points, Prem, that you raised. One is, work is not your entire life, which you mentioned in the previous section. And second is that it has nothing to do with the kind of organization, except that one that focuses on human beings and employees being human beings, perhaps have that culture of sort of taking care. So it really is nothing to do with whether you're of Indian origin or you're an MNC or whatever. Now I'll come down to personal questions. In fact, Dr. Sangeeta, you mentioned that you were drained in terms of the load that you're experiencing with so many cases coming to you. How do you personally deal with burnout? Have you experienced it, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, right. Thank you very much for that. So I was going through midlife crisis some time ago, and I tried to climb Mount Everest. And it takes 9 days to reach on top. And on the 7th day, I felt very sick. And I almost gave up. So when you climb, right, it's not the summit. I climbed the Everest base camp. So GP is looking at me like, you did the summit? No, I did the base camp. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is on the 7th day, I was sick. I was flat and almost like, I don't know what. So there's no water, there's no oxygen. There's very little anything above. And there was a 73-year-old Japanese gentleman. He was walking ahead of me. And I saw him, I caught on to him, and 2 days later, we reached the summit together. Connecting with a fellow human being is the most valuable lesson that I've learned. There is no recipe for burnout. It's so individual, it's so personal. I think we need to figure it out for ourselves. I would like to leave you with this formula, which is called PERMA, which is like our god of positive psychology. His name is Dr. Martin Seligman. He talks about positive emotions, feeling engaged at work. A 75-year-old Harvard study says that human relationships are the most important predictor of well-being. It's not those 500 friends on Facebook, but it's those 5 friends who stick with you when you're in trouble, like the Japanese gentleman who helped me. Meaning in life, as you mentioned, that's the McKinsey study, which says meaning is the most important. Like, who would think that millennials want meaning at work, right? They're really looking for meaning. Don't tell me what to do. Tell me what to do, but don't tell me how to do it. They want autonomy at work. They want belongingness, and they want a sense of competence. Sense of feeling accomplished. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember PERMA, positive emotions, feeling engaged at work, relationships, meaning, and a sense of accomplishment. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, Sourabh, you run an organization. So, I'm sure this is a full-time, 24-hour job. Yeah? Have you experienced burnout? How do you deal with it? I know you have a larger goal to accomplish. You may not have time to pause. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I think everyone in this room probably works fairly hard. And that's true for us as well. It has been now 7 years. I have not taken a 2-day proper off till date. Like every vacation is a working vacation. So, but somehow that doesn't cause us burnout. My burnout story is more day to day. Like few months back, and not very long, 6, 7 months back, I somehow stopped feeling like going to work. I used to wake up every morning. I used to find excuses not to reach office, which was very, very unusual because, we believe in reaching office among the first people and definitely going last. So, but still you had to go to office, and somehow I dragged myself every day, drove to office. And after a week, I started feeling what's wrong. Like as a company, we were doing well. We're getting a lot of businesses. We have almost we were growing 20% month over month. We were funded. Our client feedbacks were good. So I just trying to figure out what is wrong with me. Why is it happening? And to come out of it, I did one of the most common mistakes. I thought, maybe, let me go on a vacation. So I booked a Goa trip. It did not become full vacation, but still kind of relaxed for at least half a day to a day there. It helped me for a few hours. Again, after coming back, 3 hours later, I was exactly in the same state. So that time, started wondering, how do I solve this? Because this is not going to be sustainable. From all possible thoughts came through. And then finally, we went back to the root, that why did we start this organization? And whether that causing is being achieved or not. So Advantage Club's primary goal was to actually not to help organizations retain. That's what we talk now. It was to make employees' life much better, because we believe that they spend 70% of their active life in offices. So they should feel more happier at their job. And somehow, while running this organization, we stopped asking those questions, that whether we are achieving those goals or not. We started looking at the first level metrics, which most of our clients also celebrated, that engagement rates of the program is high, redemption rates are high if there's any rewarding, how many people are engaged. But we were always afraid to ask the real question, that are we making an impact? Because you don't know what's going to come out of that data point. So finally, I made an effort. I told my data analysis team that I think we need to introspect, and let's look at, are we running a commercial venture or are we running a real venture? And if you're running commercial venture, that's okay, but we should know that. So we did an actual study to figure out whether employees are actually happy at work or not. Are we impacting retention more or not? To my delight and relief, when we did the first organization, we saw that more than 75% of the organizations are engaged, and engaged employees have 50% higher retention over the last 2 years than the disengaged ones. So that was a big relief. That was the first stage when I started coming out of burnout. Then we increased the scale of that study. And at that point, when we saw that results were good, at that point we decided that this is working well, and that gave me the goal back. So
you rediscovered your purpose, and I guess that was really what helped you get out of it.
Exactly right, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm mindful of time, and I think we have to wind this discussion down. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your wonderful inputs, for being vulnerable and talking about your own personal situations and talking about what you see around you. Several takeaways. One is that, in a sense, COVID has accelerated our ability to sort of talk and recognize mental health issues. Burnout is real, yeah, and that, you know, our future generation could perhaps be much more vulnerable to mental health issues for various reasons. And also that there may be very simple ways in which we can deal with issues of mental health as well as burnout. Very, very simple ways, just connecting with some human being, which is very basic to our existence as humans, could actually help us in a big way. And that organizations can definitely provide all the support, initiatives, and platforms, but employees also must take the initiative to recognize their situation and seek help. And that people leaders frontline managers can be a very strong reason or basis for us providing an environment where people feel psychologically safe, yeah, and do get the right kind of inputs for them to deal with their personal, emotional situations. So I think lots of takeaways. Thanks to all three of you once again for sharing all your important perspectives. I hope the audience will walk away with some new learnings, and I really look forward to people finding their reason to stay happy. Yeah, I know, and that their method to stay happy. I think that's really what we should all be looking for. Thanks once again.
And GP, you have done a great job. I would request everyone to give a big round of applause to GP for a great moderation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, GP and the panel. I take three mantras away: care for each other, connecting with fellow human beings, and purpose-driven work.